It all starts so simply. In your kitchen, in the bin on your curb. But where does it actually end? Well, for millions of people in Ontario, it ends up across an international border, buried deep in the soil of their American neighbors. This is the incredible story of how the most ordinary thing you can imagine, garbage, spiraled into a massive geopolitical fight. And it all kicks off with one truly staggering number. Just look at that, 3.46 million tons. Now, we're not talking about steel or lumber or grain here. Nope. That is the weight of plain old garbage that the province of Ontario trucks over to the state of Michigan every single year. It's become a literal river of refuse flowing south, and believe me, it has completely changed the relationship between these two old friends. And that really brings us to the core question of this whole explainer. How on earth did something as basic as taking out the trash blow up into an international showdown, one that involves tariffs, emergency laws, and the entire future of North American trade? Well, the answer, as it turns out, is a perfect storm of politics and, you guessed it, money. Okay, so to really get a grip on this conflict, we first have to understand the sheer scale of this operation. This isn't just a few trucks here and there. It is a massive cross-border waste corridor that's been running for decades, and it's all built on a very simple economic truth. Think about this for a second. According to Michigan's own data, almost 15%, 14.35 to be exact, of all the trash being buried in that state doesn't come from Michigan, or even from anywhere else in the United States. It's Canadian. Now, that's not some kind of accident. It's the direct result of a really powerful economic incentive. So why Michigan, right? Why would an entire Canadian province spend millions of dollars to truck its garbage hundreds of kilometers across an international border? Well, the answer comes down to one, almost absurdly small number. And here it is. This is the heart of the whole issue. To dump 1 ton of trash in an Ontario landfill, it can cost you over $100. In Ohio, it's almost $5. But in Michigan, get this, just 36 cents. That's the state's surcharge. This huge price difference created what experts started calling the magnet effect. And you can see that magnet effect in full force right here. I mean, if you're a waste hauler in Ontario, the economic choice is a no-brainer. It is so much cheaper to pay for the fuel, the drivers, and the logistics to haul that trash all the way to Michigan than it is to just dispose of it at home. Michigan, whether they meant to or not, basically put out a giant welcome mat, and Ontario's garbage trucks came rolling right in. But, that welcome mat came with a pretty heavy price. This policy has made Michigan the undisputed champion of per capita buried trash in the entire United States. We're talking almost 70 tons for every man, woman, and child in the state. And it's taking a toll. The state's landfill capacity is shrinking fast, estimated to last maybe only another 21 years at the rate they're going. So, faced with this looming reality, Michigan's governor, Gretchen Whitmer, decided it was finally time to turn off that magnet. Her administration has, time and again, put forward a solution in the state budget. Take that 36-cent fee and raise it to $5 a ton. Now, the goal here isn't just about raising money, it's about deterrence. Pure and simple. And let's be absolutely clear about the scale of this proposal. We're talking about a 1,289% increase. This isn't some minor tweak to the budget. No. This is a fiscal wall, and it's designed to make Ontario think twice. It's a bold move, and it just so happened to coincide with a much bigger storm brewing over North American trade. You see, this whole fight over landfill fees didn't happen in a vacuum. It ended up colliding, head-on, with a simmering trade war between the US and Canada. And just like that, a regional waste issue was transformed into an international flashpoint. And this is where things just explode onto the international stage. In early 2025, the Trump administration slaps Canada with a massive 25% tariff on everything. Just a few months later, Ontario's government rushes through a controversial law, Bill 5, and they explicitly blame those tariffs for it. Then, Governor Whitmer puts her $5 fee right back on the table, and all of this is happening with a giant clock ticking in the background. The mandatory review of the entire North American Free Trade Deal, the USMCA, is scheduled for July 2026. It was truly a perfect storm. All of a sudden, garbage wasn't just garbage anymore. For both sides, it became leverage. It was a bargaining chip to be played in the high-stakes game of renegotiating the continent's most critical trade agreement. And it was Ontario that made the first big strategic move. So, with Michigan threatening to jack up its fees and the White House threatening to shut down the border, Ontario's Premier Doug Ford basically declared a crisis. His government started arguing that the province could no longer afford to depend on the U.S. for its waste disposal. What it needed, they said, was waste sovereignty. And here's the justification, straight from the Premier himself. He framed a potential border closure not just as a trade problem, but as a genuine existential threat to the province. A garbage catastrophe, he called it, that demanded immediate and pretty drastic action right at home. And that action came in the form of a very powerful new law. That action was called Bill 5. And despite its very grand-sounding title, its power is actually very specific. It allows the provincial government to designate these special economic zones, where they can essentially ignore or override existing environmental laws to get major projects built fast. And the impact was immediate. The law was quickly used to push through projects like the huge York 1 landfill near the town of Dresden. It let them completely sidestep the standard environmental review process, and this is crucial, it took away the power of local communities to say no to having a landfill in their own backyard. So what you end up with are these two completely different strategies playing out on opposite sides of the border. Over in Michigan, Governor Whitmer is using economics, those high fees, to try and push the garbage away and use the money for environmental cleanup. Meanwhile, in Ontario, Premier Ford is using raw legislative power, Bill 5, to build new landfills at home, even if it means cutting corners on environmental rules to do it. All of these political moves, the tariffs from Washington, the new fees from Michigan, the emergency laws in Ontario, they all have a very real-world consequence. They are dramatically changing the final cost of taking out the trash. And, well, someone has to pay that final bill. So what does this all mean for the bottom line? Let's break it down. Of course, that state surcharge in Michigan skyrockets, but on top of that, you've got the new tariffs and higher transportation costs. All in, the total cost to export a single ton of trash jumps from about $70 to over $117. That's a 67% increase, a cost that will inevitably get passed down to businesses and, ultimately, to regular people. In the end, this whole conflict has turned a simple supply chain into something much, much more important. As one report put it so well, this waste corridor has become a barometer for the health of North American trade. The way the garbage flows now tells us a lot about the flow of goodwill, cooperation, and economic ties between two of the world's closest partners. And that really leaves us with one final thought to chew on. For decades, we've all enjoyed an era of cheap, out-of-sight, out-of-mind garbage disposal. Well, that era is officially over. And as two powerful governments start using garbage bags as weapons in a much bigger trade war, the real question becomes, what is all this going to mean for the price you pay every single week to take out your own trash?